Hey guys, hope everyone had a good weekend. Today we will be moving forward with our discussion. We're going to talk about World War One. So this is the next kind of major event in world history that we're going to cover. And right now we're going to look at the start of World War One. All right, and so guys, there's basically three major factors that contributed to World War One. All right, and so World War One, it was a very silly war. Unfortunately, there was not a whole lot of good reason to fight it. Um, World War II, which we'll talk about a little bit, it had people in power that were killing millions and millions of people, millions and millions of innocent civilians. World War One is really just a silly mix-up. People being very um, standoffish, machismo, whatever you want to say. And so there's really three things that brought about World War One, guys. And so those three things are nationalism, which we've been discussing and talking about that importance. And so now you're going to see why. And then also imperialism, and the third is entangling alliances. Okay, and so let's start off with a quick review of nationalism. So, by the book, nationalism is loyalty and devotion to a nation, especially a sense of national consciousness, exalting one nation above all others, and placing primary emphasis on promotion of its culture and interests as opposed to those of other nations. For example, intense pride in one's nation. Okay, so that's really the simple definition of nationalism, right? Is intense pride in one's nation. Okay, but we do have to take into account that nationalists are typically trying to place primary emphasis on the promotion of their culture and interests opposed to other nations, right? So I don't care about your country, your nation. Mine's the best. I'm going to make sure it has the best of everything, basically. Whether I have to do devious things, whether I have to fight you or not. Okay. So they're not really interested in collaboration, working together with other countries, unless it benefits their country alone. They're not worried about for the good of all people necessarily. So that's where it gets kind of dangerous. And so last week, guys, like I said, this should be a review for us. We talked about German unification. So this was all brought about by nationalism, right? We talked about that the Germans wanted their own country for Germans, right? So you had these small little principalities um, that were operating individually, and some areas were controlled by Austria, some by France, where you had traditional German-speaking people, and the Germans said, we want our own country, and this movement was led by our guy, Count Otto von Bismarck. And so he basically, remember guys, he's got three things. He's from Prussia, I should say. So he wants Prussia to lead, and he has to rally the people to think as Germans, not as Bavarians, not as Berliners, not as Prussians, um, but as Germans, okay? To unify the people under this idea, this concept of German nationalism, that, hey, we're Germans, we're the best, we deserve the best. And his third thing was he had to have the outside states concede to Germany, right? So basically meaning, okay, you little principalities, you guys need to fall in line to really make this work. All right. And so he sets about this, guys. We talked about this, right? He kind of initiates the Austro-Prussian War in 1866. They win that one. And then he initiates the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. He unifies the northern German states under him. And remember, guys, after the Franco-Prussian War, the southern German states, the southern German, principalities, they all kind of said, hey, this looks like it's going to work. This looks like the best thing. Look how powerful we can be. Uh, you know, better to join them than to lose to them, basically. Okay. So remember, guys, France is going to lose this war, lose it badly. This will signal the end of Napoleon III as emperor. They'll overthrow him, institute the Third Republic of France to replace him after this terrible, terrible war for France. And with this successful victory, basically Germany will be fully unified once the southern um, principalities come into the fold. And so Bismarck, he is going to become chancellor of the new German country, the new German nation, and Wilhelm II will become Kaiser. So remember, guys, that basically means emperor in German. Okay, and so a big part of this, guys, when they defeated France, Germany took the French territory of Alsace-Lorraine. It had some German-speaking people, but it also very French, had been part of France for a long time. Um, so that obviously angered the French, and they're not going to forget it. And this is going to become a key territory, a key part of this grudge that is going to grow. Not so much between Austria and Prussia, but definitely between France and Prussia, France and now this new German state, this new German nation. So a lot of bad blood being formed because of these nationalistic designs for unification. Like we talked about, Italy is going to unify as well. In the Ottoman Empire, guys, remember I referenced that before. That's that Muslim empire, mostly made up of present-day Turkey, but also you have a bunch of those small little countries in Southeast Europe that were a part of the Ottoman Empire at the time as well, in the Balkans, the Balkan states. And so you had the Young Turks, this group of leaders in the Ottoman Empire. They were more liberal, but they're also pushing these nationalistic ideas of a united Turkey rather than an Ottoman Empire. So there's a lot of turmoil going on in the places that they controlled, the Balkan states. And so, guys, eventually in the late 1800s, they decide we need to figure this out. So they hold the Berlin Conference. European countries say we need to figure this out. In the Berlin Congress, Bosnia, which was part of the Ottoman Empire originally, is given to Austria-Hungary, even though most Bosnians are ethnic Serbs. Okay, so remember, guys, we talked about how big of a deal revolution was to the Serbians, nationalism was to the Serbians, of having a Serbian state, a Serbian nation, a Serbian country. And so these Bosnians, they aren't very pleased to be part of Austria-Hungary now. And so, guys, Germany, I want to go back to Otto von Bismarck's plan for unification, has to rally the people to think as Germans. To do this, he basically instilled this idea in the German people's mind of it's us against the world. We are destined for this greatness. We are destined to be the greatest country, the greatest nation in the world. We have the know-how, we have the skill, we have the superior culture, and all these things. And so it's our destiny. But we're the upstart, and these power brokers in Europe, France and Britain, they're trying to hold us back. It's us against the world. Nobody wants to see us reach our full potential as this great nation. And so we're going to have to will ourselves that way. And so it really becomes that mentality for a lot of Germans, and especially the German government, of it's us against the world. And so that doesn't really work well when you're trying to maintain peace among nations when another nation's going, you're all out to get us, right? So that's kind of the feeling that takes over, because that's what Otto von Bismarck was pushing, to get Germans to come together. unify, for unification. Imperialism, guys, is our second cause, second factor in the start of World War I. And imperialism, guys, is basically where strong nations overpower weaker ones. Okay, whether that is through diplomacy or whether they just go in and conquer and take over. Okay, so that's essentially imperialism. And the British, they're going to go about it early on. Okay, with India, we talked about them moving into India. So eventually, guys, they're going to take direct control after you have the Sepoy Rebellion is what it's called. You have the Dutch coming in and taking over in the East Indies. You have the French coming in and taking over in Indochina. So that would be like Vietnam or Cambodia and some of those places. Thailand, that's kind of what they called Indochina back then. And the big prize, guys, was Africa. So in Africa, the British, they're trying to take over in South Africa. You had Leopold II of the Belgians. He was the Emperor of Belgium. He wanted his own empire, so he recruited Henry Staley to explore the Congo River. And that really is what started Frenzy, because as he explored the Congo River, he's claiming everything for Belgium, mostly in the Congo. And that's the interior of Africa. People hadn't really gotten into the interior because of the mosquitoes, the disease, the forest, the rainforest. And so once they started moving in and claiming the interior, all these other countries said, hey, we got to get in on this. And eventually, guys, 1884, they actually had the Berlin Conference, which is known as the Scramble, where all these European countries, these imperial powers, they met and just took a map out of Africa and basically started carving it up and saying, okay, we claim this, we claim this, we claim this. And so Germany claimed much of Southeast Africa. The British, along with South Africa, claimed, please, baby. Britain claimed Kenya and the Gold Coast, and France claimed Algeria, Tunisia, and several Saharan states, so kind of in North Africa. Just a minute, reckon. So you also, during this time, you had the Opium Wars, okay, where the British are going to force their way into China and force China to trade and buy their opium, basically. And they were able to do that through secure technology. You had the Boxer Rebellion as well. And so the Chinese uprising and Europeans and British coming in and putting it down and setting up spheres of influence, basically. And you also had the Fashoda crisis, and this shows the potential problem that imperialism causes. Is the Fashoda crisis, guys, was basically where the British and French, they nearly went to war over East Africa. They were vying and competing for East Africa. And this really set off some fears that they were going to go to war over it. And so that's what we're talking about with World War I, starting World War I, is with imperialism, you have countries vying and competing for these countries and these territories. And there's a rivalry that forms because they're competing for them, and they're willing to fight for them potentially as well. Okay? And then France and Britain, they're also going, hey, is Germany a threat to us? So they want an imperial power, guys. In order to do that, they have to build up forces to control those territories. They have to, they have to also create a navy to protect those territories and everything else. So the Germans start building these dreadnoughts. They're basically your early battleships, and they were copying the British on that. And so the British sped up their construction. That made the Germans say, what's their deal? We're going to keep up. We don't want to fall behind. So they speed up theirs. And so it's a vicious cycle where people are arming themselves more and more and more. these European countries are expanding their military to control these territories, and they are trying to outdo the other country